guys, welcome back to Any Sooner. As always, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Join the family. We're always excited to have you guys. Alright guys, welcome back to the Indie Sooner YouTube channel. It's your boy JP. Today we're going to talk a little bit, not only about OU Baylor, but we're going to talk as well about this season in general, and what I believe needs to happen moving forward into the rest of the season and next year. I got my daughter Amaya with me. Can you say hi to everybody? Can you say hi? She's going to be on her first video with me today as we're talking. So, yeah, so here's the thing. Yesterday, while frustrating, okay, I'll take it over the TCUs. I'll take it even over the Kansas State. And here's why. We're in that game without the 3 interceptions, or really the 4 turnovers if you count the turnover on downs. As bad as the run defense was at times, we kind of knew that going in, right? And it needs to be, hear me out on this. It needs to be fixed. And I'm going to get to that here in a second. That's right. But ultimately, we are still in that game, if not winning, without those turnovers and plus territory, right? I truly believe that. So, without those turnovers, we still have the opportunity to have that game won. And at this point, the defense is what it is. Like, for us to feel like, oh my gosh, they're going to make some huge jump. I just don't think it's realistic at this point. They may make some plays here and there. They may show some flashes. And again, yeah, sure they did against Iowa State last week. I mean, to hold that 10 and 13 points is definitely a little bit of an accomplishment because, they've scored more on other teams that have better defenses than us, right? But at the end of the day, you have to look at it and say Iowa State was a terrible rushing team, and that's been our Achilles heel this entire year is the running game. And so Baylor, that's what they do. That's what they do. We knew they were going to come in doing that. And so let's get into that piece of it, right? And this is a larger conversation going into the rest of the year and into next year for me. In my opinion, we got to stop thinking that we can tell the coaches. And now I'm not saying hold them accountable and ask questions, right? But I'm talking about like, you know what? We need to just do a 4-man front. Or we need to just do a 3-man front because yada, 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 yada. And I'm like, are we watching the game? Because when we were in a 4-man front, we wasn't stopping them either. You know why? Because whoever was on the edge wasn't setting it. So regardless of if you felt like an odd man front or an even man front was doing the job, most of the time, it didn't matter what we were in. It didn't matter. And you have to look at Brent Venables being a multiple defense. And yeah, he's a 4-down guy most of the time. But trying to mix it in to do something, right, to affect that running game. And clearly, it didn't work. Now, more often than not, than it was the scheme was wrong, which, again, that's a further conversation. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. The scheme is not the issue. Okay, the scheme has been in national championship games. The scheme has had a top 10 defense, 8 out of the last 10 years. Right? So you see where I'm going with this. The plays were there to be made, they just didn't get made. And if they get made, it's a whole different conversation. It's a whole different conversation. We're not saying, can BV coach? Can he do this? Can he do that? And you can say, well, by this point, the players should get it. By this point, the players should be making no plays. By this point, the players should be disciplined. Look, I'm not saying I disagree with that. I'm not. But at a certain point, where does the accountability fall on the players? That's what I meant, right? Because if we have a known commodity, right, in a defensive staff, which for the most part we do. I mean, with BV at the top, clearly, okay, and the people that are in those rooms. At a certain point, you have to look at it, and if you look at it objectively, you have to say, is it that they're not teaching the correct thing, or is it that it's just not being done on the field? If any of you have been in coaching, You know, sometimes you pull your hair out, right? I'm an athletic director, okay? So I see coaches all the time do this, and I've coached myself, obviously. If you've been a coach and you've taught over and over again something in practice, I mean, an entire year, and then you go out and on game days, you don't see that same thing. You don't see the same team you saw in practice. You don't see the guys doing what they thought they could do. I don't know if it's the lights or whatever else. They're doing something completely different. And they're not doing what we worked on all week. And it makes you look terrible. And as a coach, you're not going to throw your players under the bus. You're never going to do that. That's unacceptable. It's irresponsible, right? You can hold them accountable and say, well, we didn't do this, but I got to do a better job. We got to do a better job of making sure they're disciplined. We got to do a better job of making sure we're doing the right thing as coaches. That's what you say. Because what else can you say? What else can you say? And that's where I'm at. We got people questioning a dude who has the pedigree of, I mean, almost better pedigree than anybody in the country when it comes to being a defensive coordinator. So we're not talking about in-game decisions here. We're not talking about, like, yeah, sure, we're talking about overall culture, but that takes time to build. Exactly, Amaya. That takes time to build. Like, you can't say, oh, in 1 year this guy's going to set this, especially when we know that we had a culture to reset. That's what we knew he was coming in to do. So ultimately, it comes down to, if I put you in this position, no matter if you think the defense is difficult or not, which he's not going to dumb it down, which, by the way, they're not doing a bunch of crazy stuff anyways. If you're in the position to make the play, you got to make the play. And you got to do your job. You got to stop worrying about other people's assignments, which is, I think, a lot of what's happening. I don't even want to hear talk about the offense. I really don't. I mean, we can talk about the turnovers, but, like, I'm tired of Jeff Lebby catching strays, okay? That man's probably been the most consistent staff member the entire year. You could hold a Texas over his head. If that's what you want to do, okay, that's fine. You know, he didn't have a starting quarterback. You could have felt like he had somebody else ready. I understand that. I even can agree with that, okay? But don't, people that try to hold Jeff Lebby's feet to the fire, you crazy. You're insane. Okay, for me, there either needs to be a jump in preparation by the players, and maybe they are. I'm not going to sit here and say they're not. I really truly don't know that the answer to that question. But if that's the case, you know, ultimately, coaches can only do so much. They only have so many hours with the guys, right? Ultimately, these guys have to do you know, their own work, even outside of it. And that's what makes, you know, good teams great. And even average teams good. You know what I mean? We got a lot of new starters. We do. We have a lot of people in new positions, and they're learning a really complex defense. They are. And so it's going to take time. And I have lowered my expectations. I'm not going to sit here and say that I didn't say, 10-2, 8-4 is the floor. I did. But I'm willing to sit here and say I was wrong. I didn't anticipate some of these things happening. I didn't. But am I going to sit here and freak out? And am I going to sit here and say, he's not the guy? No, I'm not. Okay, I'm not going to do that after 1 year. I'm just not. He has a proven record, and you may not say as a head coach, but for me, the problems that are persisting are not necessarily an issue where you say, well, the head coach isn't doing what he's supposed to do. Okay. Now, if we have these same issues going into next season, like when we start next year, if we see those same issues rearing their head, okay, then that's when I start to have a conversation of, man, are you losing people? But you know what? The team hasn't quit. He's still got them engaged. At the end of the day, the players need to make the plays that are there to be made. Yeah, what she said. So, Here's what I'm saying. For the rest of the year, we need to continue to support the team, and we need to hope that they can do well, but we need to expect that we'll see what we've seen at the end of the day. And I'm not talking about the standard. The standard is what the standard is, sure, and we can say that. But at some point, you have to adjust your expectations. I'm not talking about overall, like for long-term success. I'm talking about right now. Like right now, we know what this team is. So stop expecting them to be an 11-1 team. Because if we expect them to be an 11-1 team, then yeah, we would be. I mean, irate right now. We may be talking about somebody being fired. If we're like, man, this team should be, college football playoff contenders. And maybe we drink a little bit of the juice. And I'll put myself in there. Drink a little bit of the juice this offseason. But you know what? That wasn't realistic. And for those fans that tried to say that, whether our fans or other people's fans, hey, I hear you out. I'll accept what I did. I'll accept the fact that I stood up here and I said, well, we could expect this, but ultimately, with the defense playing the way it is, which I don't think necessarily anybody expected, especially after the first 3 weeks, for there just to be a drop off. And ultimately a mentality shift in terms of like, I'm not going to be willing to put my body out there. It is what it is. So I'm fine with having questions. You should be able to question. You should be able to say, hey, something obviously has to give. We can't continue to see this. That I agree with that, and I'm there. But for those that are ready to call for heads, for those that are thinking that, he just can't coach. I refuse to believe that, dog. I just do. I do. I'm going to wait till he gets the people that he's recruiting, right, ultimately, and to see what happens then. And even the players that get a second year under him to see if they can make a jump, defensively specifically, right? So at the end of the day, we just need to support our team, and you can support them while questioning. I know we're going to get people in here and say, oh, you asked me to be a sunshine pumper. I'm not asking you to be a sunshine pumper. I promise I'm not. You're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to be frustrated with what you see on the field. I'm not saying you shouldn't be. I've adjusted my expectations so that I just see that coming. And so I'm not as frustrated. I don't want that to be, the norm, right? Especially moving into next year. But at this point, I'll be pleasantly surprised if we continue to, be better in the run. And, the three teams are playing to end the year. Oklahoma State's the one that, you could look at, especially if they get healthy, and you say, okay, yeah. But West Virginia and Texas Tech, those not only are winnable games, but those are should-win games, right? At this point in the season, you look at it and you say, oh, we could, like you said, we could win every game left. We could lose every game left. I see West Virginia and Texas Tech as winnable games. Okay, Baylor was a winnable game, obviously, but they're a good team. I don't see West Virginia and Texas Tech as games like, oh my gosh, we should lose. So moving into the next last 3 weeks of the season, man, we just have to look at it and say, okay, are we going to make the plays that are there to be made? And if not, that is what it is. At the end of the day, the players have to make the plays when they're put in a position to make the plays. And hopefully we continue to see guys grow into next season and or see new guys step up that will do that. Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. You can coach as much as you can. You can work as hard as you can behind the scenes. But when the product on the field is what the product on the field is, you're held accountable as a coach, whether it's fair or not. Now, for me, again, my thing is I'm not in the space to, unless it's just like we were 1-9, something like that. I'm not in the space to hold somebody's feet to the fire in their first year, teaching a new scheme, trying to do, have a new culture, whatever else like that. I'm waiting till halfway through the second year, beginning third year, to really speak up about that. But yeah, that's where I'm at on it. You can agree, you can disagree, but those are my pieces to say. You got anything to say before we leave? You got anything to say to the people? You got anything to say to the people? Huh? No? You ain't got nothing to say? All right. She's like, nah, Daddy, I'm done. But okay, I appreciate you guys. Hey, Wednesday night, 9:30 p.m. Central Time, we will be back on JP and Trav Show on this channel, Andy Senior YouTube channel. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Man, love y'all. Appreciate y'all. And hopefully, we'll get a win this coming week of West Virginia. I'll actually be there with my buddy TJ from Twitter. We're gonna be driving down. He lives in Indianapolis too, so we'll be driving down together to watch the West Virginia game, and hopefully, I hope we smack them, to be honest with you. But obviously, we just want to get bowl eligible at this point. So, with that being said, Boomer.